I had a whole idea for a talk, and it was called Cooking the Missing Piece in the Sustainability Puzzle. It's still called that. But I remembered yesterday that last year, Tanya Fields had me weeping and woot-wooting by 9:30 in the morning. And so I changed my talk a little. I'm not going to make you weep or woot-woot, probably, but I'll go for some laughs and a personal story. Because the sustainability puzzle doesn't really look like that for a lot of us. It probably looks more like this. I think just arrow down. Yeah. That's a Rube Goldberg cartoon. And it's got, all this different stuff happening all over the place. And essentially, it's a depiction of what it feels like lots of times to try to eat affordably and responsibly and well. Because you have all of these warring priorities, and at the end of the day, you have a certain amount of money and a certain amount of time to make them all line up. And that could be really hard. And so I'm going to tell the story of my friend Nicole, who is not somebody who's fatally ill or financially paralyzed or whatever else people usually trot out characters to do in their talks. She's just the normal kind of hero, which is a full-time working mother with 2 kids. And every week, Nicole and I used to have a conversation that went like this. I would say, "Want to come with me to the farmer's market?" And she would get really apologetic and witheringly explain that she was already doing things that she wasn't comfortable doing, essentially buying broccoli florets already cut up off of their stems and packages of boneless meat and sometimes meat already made into meals and lamb vindaloo and whatever eggs she could get that she felt remotely okay about. She was doing all of this stuff and she was still struggling to feed her kids and her family in a normal, doable amount of time with a normal, doable amount of money. And so no, she didn't want to come to the farmer's market. And that's really the puzzle. She was already doing whatever she could, and she couldn't add on top of that the idea of dealing with the whole vegetables we really want to eat and that a lot of us here grow or want to grow, and the meat we feel good about. Because what we all want is, this is the sign for next slide. Just go arrow down. Yeah. We want to buy this broccoli, right? Whole, beautiful broccoli with stems and leaves, and we want to buy local meat that comes with its bones and its fat and can look really scary and be really expensive. And we want to buy eggs that are laid by chickens that don't have to endure more duress than I'm sure it is to lay an egg already. And if we live in New York, then we want to, we all want to support local food systems, but if we live in New York and we want to support local food systems, around this time of year, it can often mean buying food that's a little bit weather-worn or can get a little monotonous. I don't know how many of you have been eating kohlrabi and turnips for months now, but I have. And so it's a puzzle. And I didn't feel like I could really approach Nicole with my deep instinctive sense until I could put my money where my mouth was. Because trying to tell a mother of 2 kids how to do things differently when you are not a mother of 2 kids is unwise and maybe detrimental to your welfare. But my suspicion was that the problem wasn't that it was going to add extra time and extra money to Nicole's already busy life to buy that whole beautiful leafy broccoli and buy that expensive lamb and those gorgeous eggs. But that the problem was the convenient version of all of that food that she was already buying. Pretty much that she, and so many of us, was coming at it backwards. and thinking that something was the problem, or an even bigger problem than feeding ourselves with really, really busy schedules and really limited budgets already is, as opposed to what buying all of that is, in fact, which is the solution. What I felt and wanted to tell her was that buying the whole broccoli, buying the bone-in lamb, spending what she thought was more money and more time was actually the way to feeding her family the way she only imagined she could. So I didn't bring any of that up, and every week I would ask her to come to the farmer's market, and every week she would say she couldn't. And that was fine until a friend lent us the house for the weekend, and I realized I could walk the talk that I had been talking, and I shopped as I always do, which was buying the broccoli, buying the lamb, buying the eggs, and I started to cook. And I made this. The wonderful thing about having written a book is that people cook the food in your book, and they take photos of it, and they make it look really beautiful. So excuse me if this looks fancy. It's not fancy. It's just that bloggers are really great at photographing food. And I cooked this, and I think you can do one more, and this. And the first was eggs on cut up broccoli tops, and there was also some kale. And the second was the broccoli stems and leaves, which I sauteed with some garlic and olive oil and stuck in a blender and pureed and put on toast. And this is the wonderful garbage that you have left over when you buy whole vegetables and whole meat. It was a bone and some fat and, the top of the pepper that you get if you don't buy the pepper strips. It was all the stuff that she thought was this huge obstacle to cooking. And I was taking all of the stuff that she had perceived as the problem and turning them into the solution. And after 2 meals, Nicole ran into the kitchen. And she was like, wait, no, this is what I want to do. This is not taking you a lot of time, and this seems really easy. This doesn't seem puzzling. And the great thing was that all I was doing was what she had been feeling that she couldn't all along. And so we spent the rest of the weekend focusing on the great kind of puzzle, which is how to softly scramble eggs and how to put vegetable scraps into a pot and then to bring it to a boil and then lower it to a simmer. And egg poaching, which I know can seem like total magic, but that's a great kind of puzzle to solve. And I think you can do the next one. We didn't do this, but this is just here for New Yorkers who have been dealing with kohlrabi and turnips for so long, because it's from an article that I did about turning the kind of gnarly, hard-to-manage winter vegetables into unexpected things, and it just involves shaving them up and putting on some lemon juice and olive oil. That also looks really pretty because it's from a magazine. But the point is that all we were doing was coming at the problem backwards and using what she had imagined, and so many of us imagine, is the really hard thing to attend to the puzzle, which is how to make our sustainability priorities line up with our living priorities. And so that was a great weekend, and it felt to me like what we had done was kind of really what goes on in this Rube Goldberg cartoon, which is essentially take this incredibly simple thing, which in this cartoon is wiping your face with a napkin, and instead of having the toast fly up at the parrot and the parrot poop into a bucket and the bucket hit the alarm clock or whatever, which is kind of what is being done every time we're fed the idea that getting broccoli already cut up is somehow easier, or getting peppers already cut up is easier. I mean, that's essentially what the whole industry of convenient food is doing, right? It's making something that is otherwise entirely convenient. Whole vegetables, whole meat, good eggs, and making them seem really hard. So what we really did was turn what was already this into the much simpler act of just picking up the napkin and wiping your face with it. And that made me happy, and that made her happy, I thought, until I called her a week later, and I asked her if it was working, because we had spent this wonderful, delightful weekend scrambling eggs and turning them into a meal and poaching eggs and what had felt to me transformative. And she said that no, it wasn't. She still wasn't able to do it. And I got really depressed. And then she sent me an email that I don't have the original of, but I found a new photo of. And she said that this was her problem, because she still had these eggs in her refrigerator, and they came already cooked and peeled, which meant that she couldn't scramble them, and she couldn't poach them. And to be honest, they were kind of rubbery. And I liked that. And I had to explain to her that it wasn't that she couldn't use these to make the kinds of meals we'd been talking about, but just that it was a lot harder. And I think that that's really the point, that these eggs make it harder and actually don't solve any problem, unless your problem is this. Yeah, which is another Rube Goldberg cartoon. And that whole contraption is designed to get an egg out of its shell. That's it.